Hello, and thank you for joining us again. I will be interviewing Professor Jim Nicell. Professor Nicell, you were professor and dean of engineering department at the McGill University in Montreal. You've been involved in odor regulation and assessment since the 1980s. Today we're going to talk about the evolution of odor assessments, current odor regulations in Ontario, and future improvements for new regulations. Now, Professor Nicell, Ontario is historically the first province in Canada, and in fact, one of the first places in the world, to enforce odor regulations. This has led to many strong local consulting and manufacturing companies in this field. Yourself, you've been involved with odor assessment since the early 80s. What are some changes that you've seen in this industry? Has the assessment changed? And what about the regulations and enforcement?
I guess I would say that there's been dramatic change, primarily in the technologies that are available to really help you conduct odor assessments, if you want. The technologies are becoming more and more sophisticated. The technologies for modeling, the technologies for sampling, the technologies for measuring, and just for putting all this together, they're just quite incredible. For as much as that's changed, not a lot other has changed. So my sense here, when we hear from different presenters at a conference like this, is that we're still struggling with many of the same questions, but we're just using fancier technologies to help us try to answer those questions. So if I have to say one thing I'm concerned about is that we haven't really moved to a really comprehensive way of managing odors. And I think that reflects the nature of the variety of techniques that are out there right now, where many have different positives and negatives about them. But also we see many different jurisdictions around the world with very different ways of trying to regulate odors, and many of them are just completely inconsistent or maybe even incompatible. So we're in a place right now where a lot of work is actually required. And I think we can do something. It's just that we have to put a lot of these pieces together in some way that makes sense from a coherent perspective.
Okay. Where do you think the focus on university and industrial research should be then, if we now have the tools?
I think that one of the biggest problems is you can create all kinds of fancy tools, and they are very good, very sophisticated tools with incredible capabilities. The hardest part is about putting it together. And I think part of the issue could be about that a number of us are working in isolation from many others. So when you look at odors in particular, right? So odors can be seen as a purely chemical fate problem, or it can be seen as an aesthetic issue within a community. And then you couple that with, say, the physiological, psychological effects that an odor can have on a community, and then all that this results in, not just in terms of the behavior and response of an individual, but changes in property values, issues that cut into areas of zoning, etc. The problem is we've got all these disparate little areas, and nobody has managed to pull them all together. And I think the opportunity that there actually is, the challenge and the opportunity, is to get people to work together. But that doesn't mean industry people, consultants going to a department of chemical engineering per se at a university. Yes, they might do that, but they might also delve into the social sciences as well. So we have to start bringing in policymakers. We need to bring in people who understand how regulation is made. We need to bring in the social scientists, so they actually understand what are the repercussions, both of the policies and the measurements and the regulatory processes we're putting in place.
Okay. So you're talking about regulations. You've published a number of papers on regulations. What do you think, what is your opinion on the benefits of having the one odor unit?
The one odor unit is, it was a good indicator for its time, but it's not going to deal with it. It is one of a whole series of different measurements that are possible to put in place as purely an indicator of impact. But it can't be the sole basis for regulation whatsoever. So as I described in my own work here, the odor unit captures a single dimension of odor characteristic while ignoring many, many others. And even while I try to, in my work, to capture many other dimensions of odor impact, the fact is they just give you an indication of the scale of the problem, but they don't give you a basis for actually regulating it. So we actually have to come up with some method, again, that is palatable in some sense, or adaptable by our community. So think of it this way: if you create these incredibly complex technological means of demonstrating that you're in compliance with the law, it doesn't become actually within the reach of a typical consultant with the level of technical training, equipment, etc. they have available to them. So we have to create a system that is simple, which the Odour unit was at that point, but defensible and flexible, so that we can actually adapt the way we deal with an odor problem according to the local situation. So the way we might regulate odors in an urban environment will probably be very different than what we would do in a very, say, an agricultural environment. And likewise, if we're creating industry in a very pristine environment, perhaps, say, near an Aboriginal community up in the far north, it may require a whole different set of methodologies to deal with those issues. Really what I think it has to come down to is quality of life of the people around you, and the process you have to put in place has to ensure that we protect that quality of life for those people. There is no single one magical solution, such as an odor unit, that will accomplish that.
Okay, so thank you. So zoning is actually quite important in odor regulation.
Yeah. In fact, I would say that zoning is the major source of problems that I've seen. What I've seen over time is major encroachment of communities into lands that used to be either reserved for agricultural use, and agricultural use has changed dramatically over time, where you're starting to see more what you call corporate farming. So, I can think of the day when a farmer may have had 20 pigs and some dairy cows and the like, and now we see corporate farms with 10,000 head, and it may not be owned by a big corporation. They could actually be owned by a single farmer who's doing this operation. So now we have this then encroachment of these communities on what was termed agricultural land, but which is actually more industrial. So from two directions. One, I don't think we've properly managed the development of the agricultural operations appropriately, and two, I don't think we've developed our residential areas in an appropriate way, and now they're bumping up against each other. And to be honest, I actually think that's more the fault of the municipalities than it is either the group that is doing the farming in some cases, or the industries and the people who buy the houses, because they don't actually realize what they're getting into when they build in these areas. They only discover it over time.
But the odor regulations does not apply to the agriculture activities.
Yeah, but I would argue that there is a place for odor regulation in agricultural activities as well, especially when you think of the continuum of agricultural operations. You can go from a single farmer doing a certain type of activity in a localized area to now, with the type of machinery, the technologies that are available, you can actually end up with much more intensive farming operations in a local area. And I guess the question is, do they fit the model of what we used to term agricultural operations, or are they moving more toward what you consider to be an industrialized facility? And I think we don't have the flexibility right now within our regulations to recognize this continuum from a small farmer to more of a large-scale, intensive operation up to what would be otherwise considered an industrial operation.
With British Columbia and Alberta, as well as other countries like Chile and many others, they are working towards odor regulations. Do you have any general recommendations for improvement on our existing regulation?
Well, I guess I've expressed opinions in a number of places and papers on the kinds of things that we could do. I guess I go back to something that a number of us deal with regularly, is the concept of FIDAL. So frequency, intensity, et cetera, all the way through the location. So all these different factors have to come into whatever regulatory framework you set up. I wouldn't say that there's one size fits all. And in fact, I would encourage experimentation in different jurisdictions so we have a basis of understanding how effective they could be. But no matter what, I think the FIDAL factors have to enter it into it. You can't ignore the fact that, for different frequencies or durations of odorous episodes, there's going to be different reactions. So somehow we need to incorporate all these many different facets into those. And I think that's where there is no one unique way of doing that. You just have to make sure that somehow each of those facets is represented in the regulations that you're creating.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Nicell. And thank you,